Hello, I am Sandra Lee with miracleinspirations.com and the Breathe Life's Inspirations blog. I have been doing a weekly video blog, Your Health on Stress and What You Can Do. Plus, I've been doing this Facebook Live every day now for 2 weeks. So, today we are doing Ask Me Anything About Food and Eating with a requested question being about sugar addiction. Good topic and one that I can certainly relate to myself. Um, I might have mentioned before that when I was in high school, I would, on my way home, go by a convenience store, and I used to go and buy like candy, sugar, chocolate, and stuff like that, and hide it, in my house and eat it. And so I definitely have a history of dealing with struggles with sugar, and getting off of it took a little bit of an effort, but it was definitely worthwhile doing. So, what happens when we eat sugar consistently? When we eat it every day, particularly in quantities. So it's like a limited amount might be okay, but quantities is where the problem comes in. So we talked before about the whole blood sugar issue. And when I am always eating frequently, or when I'm consuming a lot of carbohydrates, including sugar, that has the sugar level in my bloodstream be high. And so when my blood sugar level is high, okay, or when I have blood sugar at all, we talked about blood glucose being like kindling on a fire, right? So it's like goes up and then it crashes. And then I have to eat again. And if I'm eating carbohydrates, if I'm eating sugar, then it goes way up and then it crashes. And when it goes up, I feel really good and I have energy. And it can have my brain be going super fast, okay? And then it crashes. And so I have this need to go and have sugar again. There's this whole issue in workplaces where people have like a dish of candy on their desk, or there's a break room and people bring in cookies or candy. It's like people bring junk food, sweets, to all of these locations where we can handily and easily go and get a little bit. And I think it's unfortunate that when people think about giving their children a treat or getting a treat for themselves, is it something that's truly healthy that people give to their children or give as a gift or use to celebrate or just to give ourselves treats? It's almost always sugar. And that is because of this whole cultural obsession, I'm going to say, with things that are sweet. So why do we as human beings want, crave, need sweets? There's a taste receptor that in our mouths that pulls onto sweet. And thinking about it on an instinctive survival level, right? It's like if there are sweet foods out there, which out in nature would primarily have been things like honey, maybe a few plant foods, right, that have that sweet taste. And because sugar gives you that immediate burst of energy that is really highly beneficial if you're in a survival situation, right? So it's like thinking about the hunter-gatherer people and how finding honey, the primarily sweet food that would have been available, was very rare, highly treasured. And when they found it, I imagine they probably just consumed it quickly to get this rush of blood sugar. And then the body goes and it takes the excess and it stores it, right? So it's like in that kind of situation, there would have been real benefit to identifying, finding, and then treasuring, right? Consuming that sugar. Thinking about a bear, when it finds, a honey beehive, right? And it finds honey, it automatically just consumes it all so that it gets stored into the tissues for it to be able to survive through the winter, right? So it's like it consumes as much as it possibly can, which then gets stored for long-term use of that blood sugar in that kind of situation, right? So it makes sense that having a taste for sweetness is beneficial for survival. So it's like, if I find something out there that is sweet, my body says this is going to provide me with a lot of nutrients that are good for my survival. So I'm going to find that, go searching for that anytime that it's possible. I want something that's sweet, because in terms of survival instinctive levels, it's got a tremendous amount of survival value. Very nutrient dense, right? But that is not the world we live in. The world we live in has sugar, sweet things be available anytime you want them. You can go to a store and get candy, sugar, pastries, things that are sweet. So given that we have that instinctive response, sugar there, eat as much of it as I can anytime it's available, right? But we put that into the modern world where that sweetness is available anywhere we want it, anytime. So if we follow that instinctive response, oh, sugar's there, consume it. And like in February, we went to Mexico and we were at an all-inclusive. So it's like food is available in infinite quantity anytime you want, including dessert. Now, we don't normally eat a lot of dessert, a little bit maybe in the snacks that we have in the evening, but certainly not in any kind of quantity every day. But because it's there, I'm going to go eat it. Find an opportunity to take advantage of this readily available in any quantity kind of thing. And it was really bizarre, actually, having a whole food situation be unlimited anytime and looking at how the instinctive response was to just consume and consume and consume and overeat way more food than we would normally eat. It was really kind of strange. But understanding that that's part of where that drive to find the sugar and eat it comes from. Okay? Built on top of that, this whole thing that because of my blood sugar goes up and then it crashes and I need to eat again, right? So it's like I'm going to go look for those sweet foods. And a common problem that people have is when they get hungry, like when we were talking about stretching the eating window, and if you get hungry, right? If you go for something sweet, it certainly satisfies that immediate need for blood sugar and for something to sustain you, but it doesn't actually last. Because again, your kindling gets burnt up, okay? So let's talk a little bit more about what a craving for sugar indicates beyond this stuff that we've just been talking about. Food cravings, our bodies crave foods when we are deficient in something that we need. So sugar cravings, chocolate cravings are signs that we are deficient in minerals. I know magnesium is one of the minerals that chocolate craving is supposed to be a sign of, and I didn't look it up to see what sugar craving is an indication that there's a deficiency of. But basically, if you are craving sugar, you can imagine that it's probably partly because you're deficient in something and your body is saying, we need this, so go find food that has that. And these instinctive cravings, right, they are looking for the foods that, you know, on biological levels, natural levels, would have those nutrients in them. So given that we have so much processed food, including processed sugar, processed flour, right? Unfortunately, if the body is craving something that is sweet that would naturally have the nutrients that it needs in it, you pretty much can't count on that in today's world because everything is processed. So the nutrients are processed out. So basically, if you are a sugar addicted person and eating sugar every day in quantity and craving it and wanting more, you can count on the process of going through all of that sugar, all of those carbohydrates and sweets is causing your body to be deficient in nutrients that are needed for processing that. So you probably need to replenish vitamins and minerals. So what happens if you try to get off of sugar, stop eating it? And I know for years, I was on this off and on cycle. I was like, I gotta just stop eating all the sugar, right? Because I was eating it every day. And when I would try to distract myself and find something to do, so find something to eat, I was always looking for something that had sugar in it. And this is even when I've been intermittent fasting, right? So it's like if I am not being aware of why I am craving things, right? For me, it's because I'm procrastinating and trying to do something. So it's like I'm just searching for sugar, okay? But just being aware, it's like there's a deficiency going on. I'm feeding my body something, it's craving something, but I'm not giving it what it needs, so the craving never actually stops. So understanding there are a lot of different reasons why you might be craving sugar, wanting sugar. And to some extent, you have to just decide, you know what? I'm just not going to eat it. So if you can just go from eating sugar every day to not eating sugar and see if you can, go without sugar, say for a week, and see what the difference is in how you feel, how you function, how clearly your brain is able to operate when you go without sugar, say for a week. And can you go for longer? I mean, I know there were times where I decided that I was going to completely go off processed sugar, right? So it's like there's sugar coming in the form of vegetables and fruit and stuff like that. But in terms of processed added sugar, can you go completely without? And I know I was able to successfully do that. But then I would get back on it again in low quantities. And that's where we are now. So it's like I've talked about having a snack in the evening with my husband, and there's almost always some chocolate in there just because that's what we like doing. But it's a small quantity, right? So it's like it's under my control and it's not something that I'm compelled by, right? So it's like I don't consider that sugar addiction, but certainly before I used to be. Okay, so another thing that the sugar addiction contributes to is the whole metabolism getting messed up, whole metabolic function, the body's ability to process glucose and blood sugar gets negatively impacted by this continual consumption. So just being aware that if sugar addiction is something you're dealing with and you need to have the food frequency, like we talked about with the meal spacing question, right? Just be aware that there might be a metabolic issue that needs to be addressed. And if you want to really address that properly, it would be my recommendation to work with a functional medicine practitioner, someone who's actually accustomed to working with this and can do testing for you, like lab tests, to find out what, the whole variety of different enzymes and functions and metabolic measures, okay? Get a blood sugar monitor, right? A blood glucose monitor where you prick your finger and you stick it on a little test strip and you stick it inside the machine and it tells you what your blood sugar is. So when we talk about intermittent fasting again and getting into ketosis, we'll talk more about this whole blood sugar thing. But you ideally want your fasting blood sugar in the morning to be below 90. And if you are having ineffective blood sugar metabolism, that's not, it's going to be higher. So, but just to get a blood sugar, a blood glucose meter and start measuring that. You're not going to do that right now because you don't really know what to do, but that's one of the things you can help yourself do to get that whole blood sugar metabolism back in balance and operating better. Combining that with the intermittent fasting that we've been talking about, and you can get that so that's all not compelling you anymore. So it's like getting sweet foods will no longer have the control over you that it does now. But if you are actually sugar addicted, you might have a really hard time getting off of it. There are some people who have programs called sugar detoxes. So it's like 21 Day Sugar Detox is a book by Diane Sanfilippo that walks you through that whole process of how to get yourself off that whole sugar addiction cycle and to a more health supporting way of eating. But let's talk about the nutrient deficiencies. So anytime we consume highly processed foods, that's going to contribute to nutrient deficiencies. So flour, like wheat flour, it's white flour is missing a large part of the grain. So the most nutrient dense part of the grain is actually the outer part, the bran, right? And then the endosperm, the inside part, is where all the carbohydrates are. So when you have whole grain anything that's made into flour, okay, they're grinding the whole grain and then they're feeding it to you. So it at least has all of the nutrients that would have been in the grain originally. And some of those nutrients are there to help your body to be able to process the starchy part. So it's like the bran part has nutrients, vitamins, oils, fats that are there to help make the consumption of that grain more sustainable for your body. If you get just the starchy part, that's pure blood sugar, right? So you're not having the other nutrients that are in that grain to help your body be able to handle that blood sugar. Now, personally, I don't recommend eating grain like that, but that's just to help you understand about this whole thing about the processing of the plant food, in this case grain, into the processed flour, and how you can wind up having nutrient depletions from consuming the white part, just the starchy part. The same thing happens with sugar. Okay, so it's like sugar comes from a whole plant, right? So it's like sugar cane. There's like whole tons of fiber, right? There's some minerals, right? So it's like sugar cane technically is a whole food. And if I were to go get a piece of sugar cane, like harvested directly out of the field, right? I wouldn't want it to be, sprayed with chemicals and stuff like that. But assuming it was organic sugar cane, because organic sugar can be made from organic sugar cane, I'm assuming. But if I were to have this sugar cane and I were just to stick it in my mouth and chew on it, yes, there would be sugar. It would be sweet, okay, but it wouldn't be nearly as sweet as the processed sugar is, because it's got fiber and it's got other nutrients, and I would have to chew on it for a while for it to get increasingly sweet. But when we take that whole food, which is sugar cane, and we process it, we take out the minerals, we take out the fiber, and all we have left is the sugar, right? That is what then causes the blood sugar to go super high. If I were to chew on a piece of sugar cane, yes, my blood sugar would go up, but it would probably go up more slowly, and it would probably go longer because it's got the other nutrients. It's got the fiber that helps to moderate the blood sugar, right? So, and it's got the minerals to help the body to be able to process through all of that sweet stuff. So understanding there's a difference between whole food sugar and pure processed sugar. So when I consume the flour, right, it depletes my body of the minerals, the nutrients that are in the whole wheat that would have helped my body to be able to process that flour. Okay, the same thing happens with sugar. Okay, if I have processed sugar, right, and that's what's in all the sweet foods. They're not using, whole food sugar. They're not using honey. They're mostly using processed sugar, maybe coming from genetically modified sugar beets. Who knows, right? So, but if I have this processed sugarcane sugar, okay, it's going to deplete my body of the nutrients required to be able to process that sugar. It's going to pull minerals from my body to be able to process. So I get nutrient depletion from the consumption of processed sugar. That was the whole point of this discussion. Okay, so understanding that if you are consuming a lot of sugar products every day, like I used to, right, then you're going to have nutrient deficiencies in your body, mineral depletion. And when I talked about salt 2 weeks ago, okay, Salt provides all of the minerals, the trace minerals that are from the ocean, and our bodies need all of those minerals. So imagine that by consuming these processed foods, processed flour, processed sugar, okay, it's going to deplete my body of those nutrients. Consuming these, high sugar products is also stressful. Anytime I have stress, whether from what I'm eating or for just dealing with what's going on in the world right now, my body's going through the nutrients, using up my vitamins, my minerals, right? To be able to deal with stress in general. Anytime I need to heal something, anytime my immune system is having to fight something off or repair damage or fight an infection, right? My body goes through more minerals and vitamins, right? It utilizes those resources that it needs to be able to have body functions, right? We need the nutrients because that's what's required for cellular function, for body tissue function. All these things requires nutrients. So if I'm doing things like eating processed foods that require extra resources to be able to process them, to help my body heal itself from the effects of these things, then that's going to deplete my body. Okay. Another thing that happens when I eat sugar, okay, is it slows down or stops some of my immune function. Consuming sugar causes white blood cells, some kinds of the white blood cells, don't know exactly which ones, to not be able to function as well as they normally would. So it impacts your immune function, your body's ability to fight off infection, for example. So it's like in these days when people are so concerned about not wanting to get sick, right? If I am healthy enough, I eat properly, if I get enough sleep, if I'm healthy, right, then whatever infection may be around out there, I am not going to get sick. So if it happens that there's an actual coronavirus, COVID-19 thing, right, and if somebody with it were to be with me and I were to get it from them, okay, if I am healthy, I am not going to get sick. If I am healthy and I am exposed to an infectious organism, I am not going to get sick. So if I am consuming sugar every day, particularly in quantities every day, that's going to lower my immune system's ability to function. So I am going to be more susceptible to whatever infectious organism is out there, and I am more likely to get sick. So that alone, with this concern about infection going on right now, is maybe enough reason to moderate your sugar intake. And if you are actually addicted to sugar, like I used to be, right, maybe it's a good time to figure out how to get that in control. If you are somebody who, like me, would purposely go to the store looking for sugar because of my cravings and my need to have it all the time, right? If that's you, maybe now would be a good time to figure out how to turn that sugar consumption, the need for it, turn it down. And to free yourself, right? So it's like you can have your life back. When I was addicted to sugar and I had to have it every day, the sugar controlled me rather than me controlling it. Another piece of that. Let's talk about that too. So when I have too much carbohydrates and blood sugar, it feeds Candida, yeast. And I used to have problems with yeast infections. Like regularly, I used to have problems with it. To the point where, I remember when I was a teenager, right? I used to have to go to the doctor and get medication for yeast infections. Of course, that was also the time when I was going to the store and getting sugar all the time. Just saying, right? So when I overconsume sugar, carbohydrates as well, right, that causes an imbalance of the microbiome, which we were talking about before, right? All these themes keep coming in, right? And all these different modules talking about food. right? So it's like the microbiome, the balance of the bacteria and the yeasts and the fungi, all of those in the body, right? If how I eat is imbalanced, if I eat too much carbohydrates, not enough fat and protein, that's going to cause an overgrowth of the candida, the yeast and fungi that love sugar. So if I am trying to wean myself off sugar, or if I'm trying to get rid of candida, right? Part of what drives the craving for sugar is the yeast. The yeasts are in there saying, hey, feed us. You haven't eaten sugar in a while, feed us. And that contributes to that craving for sugar, because they are saying, we are starving over here. We need some more sugar, right? So be aware that that's part also of where that drive for consuming sugar can come from. I mean, yes, there's nutrient deficiencies, but it's the imbalance of the microbiome that's contributing to that. And you might have heard of, Candida diets, a diet that's designed to control the population of Candida and allow your microbiome to get back into control, right? Part of that certainly involves cutting out pretty much all processed sugar, significantly reducing your consumption of fruit, because fruit has more sugar than vegetables, right? And, cutting out, reducing significantly, flour products, breads, cakes, cookies, and all those kinds of things. Now, obviously, a lot of those have added sugar, right? But just the carbohydrates from the bread alone, the flour alone, right? So it's like pasta, for example. Pasta is a flour product, doesn't have sugar in it, right? But it still raises your blood sugar. And so when you have that increased blood sugar, that's going to feed the candida, the yeast, and help it to be able to remain populous and expanding. Now that we're talking about yeast. So when you go on an anti-candida diet and you're reducing your carbohydrates so that the population of the yeast will go down, okay, be aware that you are going to have something called die-off, right? As candida, the proliferated candida, yeast, right, is in your system and they don't have enough food, so the yeast start dying off. And you want it to do that, right? You don't want them to be able to continue it being their population. That's why you're reducing your carbohydrates and sugar, right? But if there's not enough food for them, those yeasts are going to die. And all the toxins that are inside their cells are going to get dumped in your bloodstream. And you're going to have detoxification symptoms from that. So be aware that if you are going to be reducing your sugar consumption, that you might have, even if you're not intentionally trying to get rid of candida, being aware that with all the sugar consumption, you may have an overgrowth of yeast. You're going to have some die-off, right? So it's like just from reducing your sugar consumption alone, you might have some symptoms, right? You might have mental clarity issues. You might have headaches. Those are withdrawal from the sugar, okay? But part of it might also be the die-off of the yeast, contributing to muscle aches, joint aches, bad breath, all kinds of different symptoms may occur as you cut back on the sugar, and so you have the yeast die off. So just knowing that there's a lot of things that can come about as you go through the process of relieving your system of this addiction to sugar. Okay, I hope that helps. This is Sandra Lee with miracleinspirations.com. Share this with other people. Have people come here to my page. I'm going to continue doing Facebook Live on weekdays, not weekends anymore, okay, for a while. And I'm going to expand it to general topics, not just about food and eating. So we can talk about food and eating, but going to be talking about some other things, including healing, other things associated with health, just a range of different things. If you have any comments, any questions, let me know. And glad to be here with you. Sandra Lee. Breathe. Have a wonderful day.